Okay, so today we are talking about traveling with mobility issues.
Yeah, and I mean this is a pretty big issue, and so I'm going to define mobility issues right off the bat as anytime you got to think twice before you do something.
Today on Dream Travel Share Unpacked.
If you'd like to receive an email version of today's show, along with our weekly travel opportunities, click on the link below to join our mailing list. We promise to only send you one email a week every Friday. You can unsubscribe at any time, and we won't share your email address with anyone else.
Perfect.
So, define that mobility issue for us again.
Yeah, I would suggest that any of us over 50 have to, at least give, I mean, I suppose there's some fairly reckless people out there that just do whatever they want, but you get to a certain age, I'm just picking 50 somewhat at random, but anybody over 50, you're probably thinking, what are the consequences of this going to be, in the morning or next week? It's not like being 25 anymore where you sort of, jump out of the window of a moving car, do a tuck and roll and, you know, figure it's all going to be okay.
Okay. Are there destinations that lend themselves to those with mobility issues?
Well, I think it's a great question to ask. So I think before you go anywhere, everybody should have some assessment of their own mobility and perhaps constraints. So if you're using a mobility aid now, so if you're a person that uses a wheelchair or a walker, this is already on your radar. So, but like my mother, for example, who's in her mid 80s, she doesn't use any of those things, but she takes walking poles with her, for example, wherever she goes, which makes sense because if she were to fall, it would be a much bigger deal than if I were to fall, or certainly if one of my kids were to fall. Again, they just roll them right back up again. Doesn't really matter. But so I think you do have to take a look at the destination. So certainly for those of us that live here in North America, we build our cities to make it accessible for people to get to, and it's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good, right? We don't build buildings over here where people that are in a wheelchair are unable to get into. If you go to Europe, for example, so the Europeans, again, are decades ahead of us in some ways, but not in this particular way. So in this particular way, and it's partially because they have infrastructure and roads and buildings that are centuries old, and it's more difficult for them to retrofit all of those buildings to be perfectly what we would call ADA compliant, American with the Disability Acts compliant. So you got to think about it, right? Cobblestone roads, again, I'll use my mother as an example, who's pretty mobile, particularly for somebody in their mid 80s, and she has to think real hard before she'll go to Europe and she'll enjoy it, but she won't be doing the same amount of exploring by foot that I would do.
Yeah, yeah. Are there modes of travel that are better than others?
Yeah, I think so. And again, I think you need to sort of envision what it's going to look like for you. So in the old days, where we used to pop people on and off motor coaches for sort of land tours, that can be rough, right? If you're, three or four steps up on and off a motor coach, every hour or so, if you're using a mobility aid. Likewise, river cruises, not great for again, these boats are small, so they don't really have room for electric scooters and motorized wheelchairs. Usually the elevators don't go to every deck.
Yeah.
And quite often it can be when you're rafted to other ships, you're going through somebody else's ship to get to shore or whatever. It's river cruises are not a great choice for people that use mobility aids. Now, if you're a bit pokey, if you're a bit, if you can move, again, my mother, so slow or slower if you like, but she can still do these things. That's fine. Yeah, most of the river cruise lines accommodate people that want to move. They call them the gentle walking groups, I think sometimes,
Yeah.
where you're just moving a little bit slower. But yeah, river cruises are not great. Expedition cruises. Keep in mind that on an expedition ship, you're going to more remote places. You are usually not docked. You are usually anchored, which means you will be on and off Zodiac boats. Now you get help getting on and off Zodiac boats. We've sent people in their 80s to Antarctica before, and they've had a great experience. You get help, but if you've got severe mobility issues, expedition cruises are not a great choice for you. Ocean cruises, great. Again, they've got ADA rooms. There's elevators that can get you to every deck. Again, you might want to look at the itinerary and see how many ports you're anchored at versus where you're docked. But ocean cruises can be a really good choice for people with mobility issues.
Yeah. Will the cruise lines provide mobility aids at the destination?
You can do that. The cruise lines don't do it, but there's a separate organization called Special Needs at Sea, and what they do is they arrange. So if you wanted a wheelchair, if you're going to do a European cruise and you're boarding in Rome, and you don't need a wheelchair to travel, but you think it might be good to have one on board, they will arrange to have one on board the ship for you. They will get it to the ship. So the answer is yes. It's a separate organization that does it, but uh, you if you want a mobility aid to meet you at the ship, that can be arranged. And then of course once you're on the ship, again, ocean ships are very good for having accessible
Storage.
rooms. They don't call them ADA rooms because ADA is specifically American term, but same thing, ADA, compliant or compatible rooms.
But again, the river cruises, they do not have room to store a
No,
mobility aid like this. Okay.
no,
Okay.
no. I mean, I've sent people on river cruises before. Not all the river cruise lines will accept this, right? So Viking, biggest river cruise line out there, they're not going to do this. And so if you have a foldable wheelchair, or most people in wheelchairs don't end up on river cruises. More likely, it's a walker, one of those
Yeah.
foldable walkers. Those are fine. It just has to fit in your room because they just don't have a lot of space.
Yeah.
On
And
ocean ships, it's a bit different.
Bob, on river cruises, I've seen quite a few when I've been on the river cruises that fold up. They can put them under the bed. They have a little seat so they still can go on the excursions in the slower pace group.
Yeah.
And then as long as it can fold up and fit in the room, then it's okay.
Yeah, and I think that's a great solution for folks that are, again, if you just think of yourself as, yeah, I can walk. I'm just a bit slower, and I do worry about falling, which, any normal person that again is over, I'm picking 50 somewhat at random, but you know, I'm not quite 60 yet, and I worry some days I don't agonize over falling, but certainly if I'm in a place where there's ice and snow, I think, yeah, if I go down, it's it's not going to be a good time, and I'm reasonably fit. I'm not worried about getting back up again. I'm worried about, the bruising and recovery for 4 weeks after that's going to wreck my life. So the whole idea of a foldable walker that's just going to make you a little bit more steady when you're in places with uneven terrain, which is pretty much everywhere outside of North America, really.
Yeah.
Australia, New Zealand, they're pretty good. They're more like we are than Japan is more like we are than they are like Europe. But the vast majority of the world, there's not a whole bunch of flat surface, and there's curbs and other things you have to negotiate. A folding scooter, I think, is a great solution for many, many people.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of suggestions do you have for that reluctant traveler with mobility issues?
Right. So you've heard this is not my original thinking. You've heard the whole thing about, when you first retire, it's go, go, and then it's go slow, and then it's
Yeah.
no go. And obviously, we want to delay the no-go phase of this as long as possible. For people that like to travel, it's important that you be able to continue to do so. So the things you can do, number one is kind of get over your own, I remember my father-in-law, he had a big thing about having one of those foldable scooters we were just talking about because he thought that it made him look like an idiot, right? Um, and we finally had to sit him down and say, look, you got to get over this, right? Like, first of all,
Yeah.
you're 82 years old. You should not be this susceptible to peer pressure at this stage in your life. And who cares how you look? You get to experience it. It's better than sitting in your basement. So, get over yourself would be, one suggestion. Second thing would be is that, assess realistically what you can do and can't do, and take a look at the things you want to do when you're on vacation, and challenging yourself a little bit. Nothing wrong with that. Just make sure you've got, again, so I'll go back to my mother, take your walking poles. It's a very easy thing to do to make sure that you can still do the things that you want to do. Um, and again, as I was mentioning, take a good look at the itinerary that you're considering too. So again, if you've got some mobility issues and you're on an ocean cruise and 8 out of 10 of your ports of call are anchored, what happens at anchor ports, right? You have to be getting on and off tender boats, which again, they'll help you, right?
Mhm.
You can certainly do it, but a cruise where you are going to be docked, where you walk down a gangway to get off the ship, more of those ports than the anchor ports is probably a better a more appropriate choice.
My parents were just on a river cruise and in their 80s, and they got some help at the airport.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
people overlook that a lot about requesting boarding assistance at the airport.
yeah, yeah, for sure. That is a good. You don't want to start your wonderful journey by being exhausted because you had to go from A to B in the airport.
Well, it's actually, I'm thinking about requesting boarding assistance next time.
You're
I mean,
not.
in a great big airport, I'm thinking like I had a tight connection in Atlanta about a year ago. Well, that airport is ridiculously large.
Yeah,
And so what boarding assistance gets you is the ride on the golf cart to get you to, where you're going, and priority boarding, whether you've got that in your airline status or not. They'll do all this for you, right? They'll get you to the gate in time and all that. Hey, if you've got any questions at all, request, and it doesn't cost you anything. So
yeah.
request boarding assistance. Again, my mother, one of the things we always do for her every time we book a flight, we request boarding assistance. It's marginal whether or not she needs it or not, but it's sure nice.
Now, do you do that for your mom before, while you're making the airline reservation, or do you do that when you are at the airport?
You can do either. I usually try to get a note on the file when I book the ticket,
Yeah,
just because and then I would confirm it upon check-in. So check-in 24 hours prior, of course. Okay, is boarding assistance showing on there? If not, because the airlines, again, not well-run organizations, stuff falls off, right? So you're gonna want to check it three times. One when you book the ticket, second when you check in, and third when you're actually at the airport. Say, oh yeah, when you're checking in, I did request boarding assistance. And then it should be fine from there.
what are we going to be talking about next week on Dream Travel Share Unpacked?
Yeah, so once a month we do a vendor feature. Next week we are going to be discussing Colette. So people maybe have not heard of Colette. They're a land cruise company, or land tour company. So we're going to be talking about what exactly a land cruise is and how Colette fits into that world.
Oh, I look forward to that.
All right, we'll see you then.
Bye for now.
If you enjoyed this video blog, it really helps us when you like, or better yet, subscribe to our channel so that we know the best content to produce for you. If you want to book a cruise or packaged land vacation, then we'd love to help you out. We know the products and destinations very well, and we can always get you something not available on direct bookings. Our coordinates are in the notes below. Also, if you haven't signed up for our newsletter yet, you get one email a week every Friday with some commentary and some different deals that we're seeing in the marketplace. We don't share your information with anyone else, and if you decide it's not for you, then we're sorry to see you go, but there's an unsubscribe button at the bottom of every email. See you next time.